Okay, so welcome to my niche mini masterclass video, as I'm calling this. And as you can guess, this video is going to be all about niches. It's not going to be one of those stupid hot niche videos, but what we're going to be talking about here are things that can actually increase your chances of making sales on Amazon KDP. Okay, so we're going to go through a ton of different things in this video. We're going to talk about broad niches, why they're probably not going to be the best choice for you. We're going to talk about niching down and how you can find the sweet spot for niching down so that you can enter into competitive niches whilst actually increasing your chances of getting ranked quite easily. From there, we're going to talk about niche positioning, which is going to be the kind of main section of this video, and it's going to open up a whole new world of possibilities to you when it comes to actually publishing books on Amazon. I can promise you that. From there, we'll talk about niche mixing, we'll talk about niche hopping, as I'm calling it. And then toward the end of the video, we're going to talk about the measurement worksheet generator app that's coming out on the 3rd of November. So that might seem a bit random, but it is all going to tie together in this video. Okay, so let's get into this video and talk about why broad niches are probably going to be the worst type of way to position your book on Amazon. So when it comes to positioning your book on Amazon, your niches, your keywords, it's all going to kind of be just one thing, and that is how you present your book to your audience. Okay, how you present your book to Amazon's customers. Your title, your subtitle, your book cover, this is what you are presenting your book as. Okay, so if you are positioning your book in such a broad way, so for example, a coloring book for adults, a kids coloring book for ages 4 to 8, an activity book for kids, relaxing word searches, preschool workbooks, and I've put that in there because I'm going to use one of my books as an example here. So you might be thinking to yourself, like, kids coloring book for ages 4 to 8 and relaxing word searches, isn't that kind of niching down itself? And from experience, I can say no, it's not. So the reason for this is because it remains broad. So if you're talking about something like a word search, a relaxing word searches in general are supposed to be relaxing, and kids coloring books for ages 4 to 8, it's still too broad because a huge section of kids coloring books are going to be for ages 4 to 8, if that makes sense. Okay, so what people do here is that they think that they're niching down because that they are, going for a certain age group, or they're targeting like a relaxing coloring book or something like that. And the reality is, like I say, this still remains extremely broad within that niche. Okay, so as we go into the next section of niching down, you're going to see how niching down actually works and how I found the sweet spot for niching down. Okay, so just to give an example here, if you're positioning your book onto Amazon as a coloring book for adults, 100 pages of relaxing illustrations for men and women, you need to look at how broad that actually is. So, coloring book for adults is super broad, relaxing, super broad, men and women still super, super broad, and it's going to be mega, mega competitive. It's going to be extremely hard to get your book ranked. The likelihood is that you're going to spend a ton of money getting something like this produced, and a ton of money to make a ton of money to spend on ads, and it's going to end up failing. So another example here would be word search for kids ages 4 to 8, 35 cute word finds for boys and girls. So again, positioning your book as a word search for kids ages 4 to 8 isn't necessarily niching down, in my opinion. Still super broad for boys and girls, super broad still as well. So what are the pros and cons of positioning your book into such broad niche? Now, obviously, the pros are that you have the potential to hit it big and make a ton of sales. So you would have to have a real incredibly high quality product. You'd have to have a great understanding of the niche that you're getting into. You'd have to probably spend a ton of money on getting something high quality made. And then from there, of course, to rank your book is going to take you a ton of money when it comes to advertising your book and getting it ranked. So I think one of the biggest mistakes people make here when it comes to entering into broad niches is that they assume that this is what entering into a competitive niche is. Okay, so in the next section of this video, we're going to talk about entering into competitive niches and positioning yourself into competitive niches versus going just stupidly broad with the way that you present your book. Okay, so there's going to be a huge difference. And like I say, the cons here, the chances are that you're going to screw this up. You're going to waste a ton of time and money. And of course, the cost to rank your book are going to be higher as well. Okay, so let's use one of my books as an example. We're just going to search for the preschool workbook that I made about 6 weeks ago and published onto Amazon. And I positioned this as a preschool workbook, which I think you'll agree is super broad. Now, the book is actually ranked at the bottom of the first page, which is quite telling that you can get into these competitive niches and position your book as such. But what I found was that it was really hard to stick around on the front page for this search term. And come tomorrow, the day after, this book would have probably dropped off onto the second or third page. It kind of jumps all over the place. But luckily, due to the way that we positioned this book, and the activities inside this book, we've managed to get a decent ranking for other search terms, which I'll talk about later on in the mixing niches section of this video. And if you're wondering why the book cover sucks, it's because it's the first book cover that I've actually made myself in about 10 years or so, but there we go. And just to touch upon the measurement worksheet generator app that comes out on the 3rd of November, what I'm going to be doing as part of the bonus for that is to actually start packing out this brand name of Sparkle Hard or whatever I've called it here. We're going to be adding 5 or 6 more books to this brand name, and we're going to be showcasing that in the bonus for that software. So that's something that I've never done before. It's going to be pretty incredible to do, but we're going to be getting back into this niche and adding to it, because having 1 or 2 books in a niche is not going to make enough sales. Okay, so let's take a look at niching down and why it's so important. And again, we're going to be using some of my own books as an example here. So what does niching down look like? So things like dinosaur coloring books for kids and then whatever age group, large print 2024 word searches, addition and subtraction workbooks. So we're going to use one of my books as an example here, landscape coloring book for adults. Again, going to use a book that I'm working on as an example here as well. So the great thing about niching down is that you can enter into these competitive niches, provided that you do this right. You can enter into competitive niches and get your book ranked quicker for less cost as well. So I've kind of found the sweet spot over the last few years of doing it in such a way where, again, so remember the title for your book, the subtitle, your book cover, the way you present your book to your audience. This is what your niche is, okay? So the way that I present pretty much all of my books is that we have the subject for the book, we have the broad niche, and then we have the audience. So I'm going to give you a couple examples of that now. So for example, landscape coloring book for adults, we have landscape, which is going to be the subject landscapes. Then we have the broad niche, which is going to be coloring books. And then we have the audience, which of course is for adults. Okay. Another example here would be something like an inspirational word search for women. So the subject, we have inspirational, we have the broad niche, which is going to be word searches, and then the audience, which is going to be women. Okay. So for me, I found this to be the absolute sweet spot for niching down and making sales. So before we get into the examples, the pros of this, obviously that we have the potential to hit it quite big with less competition. So getting our book ranked in these type of niches, positioning our book in this way, it's going to be much easier to get our books ranked. The cons are that some people, they don't really know how to niche down and they go way too far. They niche away from their audience. And sometimes what happens is that you niche down in a niche where you need to spend money. So for example, if you want to create like a high quality coloring book, it has to be proportionate to the project cost, okay? So for example, if you're spending like $500 on illustrations for a coloring book and you're niching down into a sloth coloring book for women aged 50 plus or something stupid like that, it's not going to be proportionate. The potential result is not going to be proportionate to the project cost, okay? Because the audience has been kind of niched away to the point where you're not going to make any sales. So let's just use a couple books that I have as examples here. Okay, so let's use a couple of my books as examples, and I must apologize because my voice is going, but I want to make sure that I get this video done anyway, so you're going to have to bear with me. So let's take a look at the addition and subtraction workbook that I produced and uploaded over a year ago onto Amazon. So whilst this doesn't follow the exact formula that I've just outlined, we're still niching down from that bigger section, the broader niche, which would be math workbooks, and we're targeting addition and subtraction workbooks now. Excuse me. Even though the book has been live for a year, we're over a year, we're still ranked here on the first page with 30 reviews. And despite the price having to go up to $9.77 because of the price increases and the amount of pages in this book, we had to go up to $9.77. And despite that, it's still making some sales. It's still ranked on the first page. And that's the importance of niching down. So another example from another one of my books, we're actually on the second page here for a book that isn't selling well at all, is this How to Draw book, okay? How to Draw Animals. So what we did here, and again, this is going to emphasize the power of niching down and positioning your books. What we have is How to Draw. So that's the broad niche. Then we have animals, which is the subject, and then we have for kids, which is going to be the audience. So despite the fact this book hasn't been selling well at all, we still managed to stay, as of yesterday, I think actually we dropped off onto the second page. We were on the first page for this, but as we can see, we're still on the second page, even though we've not been making too many sales. So that's the power of niching down. So just use this as an opportunity to touch back upon the coloring book case study that I offered with the counting worksheet generator. So if you purchased that from me, I think it was maybe a month or so ago now. If you purchase that through me, you're still going to get access to this coloring book case study when it comes out. Also, if you're interested in having this offered as part of the bonus for the measurement worksheet generator, let me know and I can try and sort something out there. But this is going to be the book that we're working on, which is a kind of landscape coloring book. So I'm going to talk about in the next section why it might not be best for me in this case to target it as to position this as a landscape coloring book for adults, but using this as an example. What we have again, remember we have the subject, which is going to be the landscapes. We have the broad niche, which is going to be coloring books, and then the audience, which is going to be for adults. Okay, so that's the way that we are niching down. Okay, so let's move on to the main part of this video, which is niching positioning. That's a typo. It should be niche positioning. So what this is, and this is something that I've really struggled to sort of communicate with people until now, because I'm going to be using actual examples of my books and books I'm producing in future. So what is this? And we're talking about serving an audience with something new that they need or want, but aren't necessarily searching for. And yes, my voice is getting worse as I do this. So the pros of this is that it opens up a whole new world of standing out in competitive niches. So the cons here, of course, is that the targeting could go completely wrong. And like I say, I'll show some examples in just a second. So we're going to do examples for we're going to do a couple examples here using the measurement stuff, the worksheet generator that's coming up on the 3rd of November. So in the next few days, measurement workbooks are going to become the greatest niche on the planet when it's not necessarily the case. And the reason for that in this case is that just because you have the ability to create content, specific content such as measuring, okay, it doesn't mean that people on Amazon are necessarily searching for measurement workbooks. Okay, so the example here would be if someone was using this app and they created a measurement workbook, the chances are that they're not going to get optimal visibility to actually make those sales. So that doesn't mean that an audience doesn't want to purchase books that have measuring components in them. So what we could do in terms of positioning example here is that we'd actually create a grade 2 workbook for kids and make that around measuring temperature and mass or whatever. That's just an example. I've not looked into it enough just yet, but that's the way that we could position it. Now, the reason that we're positioning as such is because you have to do your research to establish what is actually selling on Amazon and the way that's positioned. So if you go to Amazon, you start typing measurement workbooks for kids, for example, you're going to see that the BSRs aren't going to be particularly good. However, if you look into grade 2 workbooks for kids, for example, you're going to see that the BSRs are going to be much more impressive for that positioning. Okay, so when it comes to positioning your book in such a way, you'd have to do your niche research to figure out what the optimal keywords are going to be to get that visibility, despite what the subject of your book is going to be, if that makes sense. So if we do have this measurement stuff that we're going to be putting into a book, we can target this into different grades, for example. Okay, so what we can do with our research here is to go over to Amazon, search for something like Math Workbook Grade 2, and then check out the consistency of the BSRs on the front page, and then establish if that is the way that we want to position our books. So doing things this way, we're going to be able to serve our audience with new content while still getting that visibility, even if people aren't directly searching for it, okay? So just coming over to the measurement worksheet generator app here, and the review for this is going to be on the 3rd of November at around 9 a.m. Eastern time. If you're interested in that, make sure that you look out for that. I'm going to do an honest and full review of this software and everything that goes into it, and the bonuses that I'm going to be offering as well. But just to use this as an example, so just because we have access to creating books with these different elements in them, so volume, for example, measuring capacity, measuring temperatures, measuring mass, etc., etc., etc. It doesn't mean that we want to position our book in such a way. So, for example, if we're creating a book that has For creating a book that is all about measuring capacity, we don't want to target our audience in that way because it's very unlikely if we do our niche research that people are searching for those terms. So what we're going to be doing is to position them into grades instead. So grade 1, 2, 3, 4, etc., etc., and position our books in that way. Or in my case, what I'm going to be doing in the bonus for this software is creating 5 different books in different grades and including a lot of these different elements, different pages into those books and positioning it in such a way where we can actually get traffic and sales while still offering our audience what they need or want. Hopefully that makes sense. So I'll do another example of this now. So hopefully that makes sense. Like if you have something like a measuring workbook for kids and you think, oh, that's the way to target this on Amazon, you want to do your research on Amazon to see if people are actively buying after they type in those search terms, and go from there. Okay, so a better way would be to research grade 2 workbook or grade 3 or kindergarten or whatever type of workbook and then see how the sales are going to that positioning. Okay, so another example here, and this is for another book that I produced, was that we have a shaped word search for kids. So I'm going to show you my book in just a second. Okay, so this is a word search that I created a while ago on May 21st, and the sales for this have been absolutely the worst, I think, for any book that I've made in like the last sort of few years. It's gone incredibly bad. I'll explain why in just a second. But when it comes to positioning in this sense, what we had is we had an application that allowed us to create these kind of nice, really cool looking shaped word searches. Now, what we didn't want to do was to target this as a shaped word search, because if we come over to Amazon, what you're going to see is that if you type in shaped word search and search for that, you're going to find that the books aren't selling particularly well. And that's because they're not positioned particularly well. So in this case, what I looked at doing, was to position this in a different way. So what I did for my book was to position it as a word search for kids ages 4 to 8 or whatever it was. So my error here was that I positioned this in a bad way in the sense that it was way too broad. Okay. So this doesn't mean that people don't want shaped word searches. It just means that people aren't searching for it. So same as the measurement workbook thing, doesn't mean that people don't want it or need it. Just means that they're probably not searching for it. So what I could have done in this case in terms of positioning was to niche down like we did in the previous videos and go for a animal word search for animal word search for kids, and then create those nice looking shaped word searches using the application, and position it in that sense so that we can reduce the competition and actually start seeing good sales. So again, it doesn't mean that they don't want it. It just means that they're not necessarily searching for it. So niche positioning is extremely important for getting found. And like I say, the great thing here when it comes to doing like your niche positioning like this is that if you want to create something completely new that the marketplace hasn't seen before, you can absolutely do that. So the video that I did the other week, my friend on Facebook, he sent me his book and we did a video about how we could position his, which was a baby dragon coloring book. So what I looked at there is my thought process was that, well, maybe people aren't searching specifically for a baby dragon coloring book. It doesn't mean that people don't want to buy books that have baby dragons in them that they can color. So what we looked at doing was to actually position that as a fantasy coloring book that includes these baby dragons as well. Okay, so fantasy coloring book is more likely to have the search the search volume going to it. Then we can give them this new offering that they've maybe not seen before inside that niche, if that makes sense. So again, another example of a book that we did recently that I showed off in the last section was the counting workbook. So again, I personally didn't think that people were searching specifically for counting workbooks, but what I did as my positioning was to create a preschool math workbook and include the counting elements because it's required for children learning that they have to learn how to count inside the book, and positioned it as a preschool math workbook because I thought that is what people are actually going to be searching for. So at this point, you're probably asking yourself, well, how do you actually establish which way to position your book? So I'll go to Amazon now and do a quick live example of how I would do this. We use possibly the shape word search as an example here. So first and foremost, we have to think logically, like, are people who are buying word searches, are they likely to want to buy a shaped word search? And the answer is probably yes, because it's fun, it's different, it makes sense within this niche. Okay. So in terms of finding out whether this is the way to position your book or not, is that you want to go to Amazon, you want to search for your desired search terms, so your keyword, what you're going to use for the title of your book, the way that you're presenting your book to Amazon's customers. You want to go through, check out how low the BSRs are, establish how low they are across the front page, and then go from there. So I did the research already for shaped word search for kids, and the BSRs isn't particularly good. It's like around 1 million. So that's going to be the absolute worst way to position our books. So in terms of how we would actually go ahead and position this book, if we were to create an animal word search for kids, what we'd want to do is to go through Amazon and check the consistency of the BSRs on the front pages. So the extension that I'm using to show off the BSRs is DS Amazon Quick View. Now, just looking at this, it doesn't look like it's the optimal way to position it, but just as an example, this could be the way that you would position your books in future. Okay, so always want to check the search terms for how you're going to be positioning your book, and then go with whatever is the best. Okay, so that's going to move us on to the next section, which is mixing niches. Now, this is something that you can do no matter how you position your book, and I recommend everyone does it for every single book that they produce, because it can get you a ton more visibility. Okay, so what is it? We're going to be targeting multiple niches where it makes sense to do so to get ranked for more search terms. So again, I'll give examples throughout this video. So example here is a fantasy coloring book for adults. Now let's say that we positioned our book, we want our book to get found as a fantasy coloring book for adults. But what happens after you get ranked for these initial search terms is that as you generate sales, you're going to start getting ranked for terms that you're using inside of your title and your subtitle. Okay, so what we want to do in terms of mixing niches here is to include other niches that people are actively searching for within that broad niche as well. So for example, here as fantasy coloring books, we also want to target things like fairies, dragons, mythical creatures. Okay, so the way that you're going to do this, and we'll use this as an example, if I just head over to Amazon now. So if we search for fantasy coloring books for adults, obviously we do our initial research on that search term, see how low the BSRs are. Now, what we want to do in terms of mixing niches is that we want to find these specific books inside this, specific niches inside this niche that are also selling as well. So, for example, we want to take a look at things like dragons and forest fairies, because what I believe is that people are also actively searching for things like dragon coloring books and fairy coloring books as well. So you can do your individual niche research on these as well. So you'd go to Amazon, you'd look for like a fantasy coloring book, see what other types of subjects are being offered inside that, and then do your research for those subjects as well. So you want to research to see if dragon coloring books are selling. You want to see if fairy coloring books are selling. You want to see if mythical creatures are selling. You want to see if baby dragons are selling, etc., etc. Go and do your individual niche research for all of these, all the elements that are going to be inside your book. So I'll use one of my books as an example as to what I mean by that now. So if we come back to our preschool workbook, I reckon we've jumped off the first page here, but I would like to still see us. We are not on the first page anymore. We've dropped down to the second page of the course of viewing this video. So that's the problem with going too broad, is that you're going to have a real hard time staying ranked for such a broad search term. Okay, so that's a prime example of how like volatile things will be for you if you do things that way. But back on topic here, what we can see that I've done is that we have a preschool workbook, but also what we're offering, the features that we're offering inside of this book, they're also going to be things that people are individually searching for. So for example, we had counting, maybe people were searching for that, I had to include it. Tracing, people are definitely searching for that. Color it by numbers, people are definitely searching for that. And possibly learning activities as well. Okay, and math as well, of course. So what we found is that we end up getting ranked for preschool math workbook. I'm not quite sure where we are on this page if we're still here. So we're here on the first page for preschool math workbooks. So I don't know the exact terms at the moment, but what we did find was that I was also ranked for some combinations for color by number books, some combinations for tracing books as well. So mixing these kind of niches like this is going to give you a ton more visibility. So that's why it's really important to think about how you're always positioning your book in the most optimal way. Okay, so let's go ahead and do another example. So if you had something like a Christmas coloring book for seniors, you want to go into Amazon, check to make sure that people are obviously searching and buying for Christmas coloring books for seniors. And then in terms of getting ranked for other search terms as well, you want to see what individual types of books are selling. So I already checked, and like gnome coloring books are books that have been selling very well for a long time. So you'd want to include that in as part of your targeting as well. So once you start gathering sales, you start getting ranked for that search term. So that's going to mean that you're not just getting ranked for your initial term, but you're also getting ranked for these other terms that people are actively searching for as well. So that's the beauty of kind of mixing your niches where it makes sense to do so. And of course, we have the preschool. I've done this in a very silly order, but we had the preschool workbook, then we were getting ranked for things like color by numbers, tracing, etc., etc. Okay, so it's how to tell people what are searching and buying. I don't know why I have that. So one tip here that I would and one of the ways that I create my books is to actually think about what the title and subtitle and positioning of my book is going to be before I start having it made. So for example, in the case study that I'm doing, we have this kind of landscape coloring book. Now, what I want to do is to research other coloring books as well, see what are hot search terms for coloring books in general. So you're going to find things like flowers are going to be popular. You're going to find things like birds and butterflies, etc., etc. Things like all those individual elements are going to be popular as well, but you can package them into, but I'm going to package them into this like landscape coloring book niche as well, so that we have all these other search terms. Once we start getting some sales, hopefully starting getting ranked for all kinds of different search terms. Okay, so hopefully again that makes sense. So again, same concept here. If you're creating this type of book, you want to go and find the individual books and individual elements of your book. So if I had butterflies in it, I'm going to make sure that butterfly coloring books are selling. Come over to Amazon, search for butterfly coloring books, and then just go through the BSRs to make sure that they're at least pretty decent. Okay. So one thing that I want to talk about is what I'm calling niche hopping, and what this is not giving a niche a fair chance in terms of the amount of books that you're creating in this niche. So the reality is that if you produce one book in a niche, it's probably you're not going to have enough knowledge in that niche to actually resonate with the audience and start seeing sales. So what a lot of people do is that they publish a book in like a coloring book niche, they don't see any sales, they move on to activity books, don't see any sales, move on to word searches, don't see any sales, etc., etc. So when you're watching my channel and you see that I'm doing like a promotion for a certain software and I produce a book, you notice that I tend to only really publish one book. So that's kind of, I don't think it gives off a good image in terms of the reality of what you should be doing, because it's just not enough. So when it comes to the next bunch of books that I'm going to be producing and showing off in the early education niche, is that we're going to make sure that we add more books, because I'm starting to learn the ins and outs of the early education niche. So that's what I'm going to be doing for the brand name that I showed you earlier. Okay, so channel content in coming up in the next few days here is, sorry, I'm obviously distracted. We're going to be adding and building on the pen name that I showed you earlier, which is the one for the preschool math workbook, and we're going to be using the software that's coming out on November the 3rd, which is the Measurement Worksheet Generator app. We're going to be using that. To create 5 or more books in this niche. We're going to be using positioning to serve this new content to a certain audience. So this is all going to be included inside the case study, but on the channel, you're going to be able to see those books regardless. Okay, so that bonus is likely to be delivered after the launch of the software. So you have to take that into consideration, but it's going to be absolutely huge. It's going to be something no one's ever done before. Like I say, we're going to be creating 5 books in a series here. Then we're going to have that case study, which is going to be for those 5 or 6 different books. It's going to be a pretty incredible case study. And then, of course, we'll have the review of the measurement worksheet generator on the 3rd of November, which is going to go live. If you're super interested in that, you want to get your notifications on, it's going to go live on November the 3rd at 9 a.m. Eastern time, I think is when I'll release that. So if you're interested, make sure that you look out for that. So inside that review, we'll take a look at things like the features inside the app, the pricing structure for the app. There's obviously going to be a lot of bullshit coming up regarding the hype of this software. So I want to make sure that I'm just showing you exactly what the software does and then showing you what the bonuses are going to be and when the bonuses are going to be released. Now, if you're interested in having the coloring book case study as part of this bonus, let me know in the comments below and I'll see if I can sort something out for that. If you purchased the last software through me, I've not forgotten about you. I'm working hard on the case study and you're going to be able to get access to that in a few weeks' time as well. Okay, so that's it for this video. Thanks for watching. I'll see you soon.